What do you make of the legacy of Karl Marx, whose 202nd birthday it would have been today, May the 5th?
First of all, it's very important to understand about these people who call themselves, the Marx, okay? And it is very important to know that one of the most dangerous people who lived in this last maybe 30, 40 years is Mark Thatcher. And he is politician as well.
So you're against all the Marx? From Karl Marx through to one of the Marx, Mark Thatcher. Yeah, Mark Thatcher got up to no good in Africa, didn't he? But he certainly wasn't a Marxist. He's on the other end of the political spectrum.
No. I'm sorry. He's definitely a Nazist. He's definitely a Nazist.
No. Marxist. He wasn't a Marxist.
Sorry, Mark? What is this, Mark? Sorry?
So, right. Karl Marx, 202 years ago, born in Germany. He was a philosopher and the founder of what became known as Marxism and communism. He was looking for a different way, a different society where people would share the wealth and the workers of the world would unite. Are you familiar with that idea, Professor?
Blame it on people who are all called Mark. Why Marxism? Why cannot be Stuartism? Or, right. I don't know, Davism.
Which ism do you follow, Professor?
Well, I follow the isms that brings good fortune to people, but not this. I don't like this thing where everything is related to names. So I don't understand why we have to call this a Marxism, because it's suggesting that everybody who is Mark is a very bad person, or maybe a good person in some people's eyes. Why you have to relate it to the name? You have to make sure that you keep the names out. Otherwise, it gives that person no what's the word, privacy.
Okay, we'll take the name out for sake of ease to help you out. What do you think of communism?
Well, I think what do you mean? The common factor?
I mean the idea that we should pool all the wealth together, all the resources, and share them out equally so that we all get a fair share and you don't have billionaires living up the street from poor people that can hardly afford to eat, as is the case in most cities around the world.
Yes, I agree with this. Yes.
Okay. Well, then that would make you something of a Marxist, although maybe not a communist. But thank you very much for that, Professor.
You are saying that if I understanding you right, you are saying if I believe that we should have a shared economy, then that is making me this thing called what Marxist?
I'm saying you're agreeing with Karl Marx when he said that we need to redistribute the wealth and...
but why are you saying I agree with this football player? This football player, he played for Germany. He's a great football player. He's chairman of Bayern Munich now, Karl Marx Rummenigge. Yeah. Now, why you are saying that I should agree with Karl Marx Rummenigge?
Well, maybe you need to watch the rest of the show, Professor. Thank you very much. That was someone claiming to be a professor. I wonder if they really were. And Karl Marx was a great mind, was a great thinker. As I said earlier, he was a philosopher. He was born into poverty and unfortunately died in poverty. And some people would say that makes him a failure, not a success story. But he didn't want to change things just for himself. He wanted to change things for the whole world. And he called upon the workers of the world to unite. You have nothing to lose but your chains. And this great t-shirt that was probably manufactured in some factory somewhere, I'm not sure where, might even be made in China, probably by people working for slave labour. But thank you very much for the gift, Jamal. This t-shirt bears the emblem of the Soviet Union, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. I can't say it in Russian, but that's what it stands for. And the hammer and the sickle represent the idea of the agrarian, agricultural peasant workers uniting with the more urbanized steel workers, people working in the city, the workers that sought employment as we went from agrarian societies into an industrialized society, and the industrial revolution from the 1800s onward, the 18th century, through to the 19th and 20th century. And this was happening in Karl Marx's lifetime, and he could see that there would be a need for the workers of the world to unite, otherwise they would just continue to be exploited by the people that own the means of production, the factory owners. And this is where he coined the term the bourgeoisie. Bourg meaning city, like Strasbourg and all the other bourgs in those regions of France and Germany. The bourgeoisie were the town dwellers, the people that could afford to live in the town, and these were the rich land-owning owners of the means of production. And of course, vast swathes of the rural poor moved into the cities seeking the work, and you had the massive influx of population. And when you have a huge population of workers, that drives down the wages. That's one of the left-wing arguments for Brexit, being if we just have open borders and as many plumbers or other workers can come from Poland and Romania, then it will drive the wages down, because the owners of the means of production, the employers, can afford to pay as little as possible. But maybe if we were organized, maybe if we did what Karl Marx suggested we do and unite, we would lose our chains. And in the chat, Ben Grant is saying, is Karl Marx economic theory a true model of reality? Well, if it was true back then, surely it is even truer now. And I think the levels or the disparity between the rich and the poor in a city like London has now reached Dickensian levels. We're now back to, and Charles Dickens was a contemporary of Karl Marx. They were around at the same time, although they were in different countries. They witnessed the same poverty, and Charles Dickens, instead of getting angry about it, just wrote some great books. And that's the classic rich man and the poor man, the pauper. In the chat, HK Stocks is saying the only people who live similar to what Marx suggested nowadays are the Amish, but then they do step into capitalism. And Ben Grant is saying we can't even model the economy to a great degree of accuracy with today's... Oh, we can even model the economy to a great degree of accuracy with today's technology. Yeah, I don't know how come we're not all living like kings with today's technology. I guess maybe there will always be poor people. But yeah, Karl Marx never saw the Soviet Union. He didn't live to see that, and this for me is the biggest experiment of communism. You've got China around today, but that's state capitalism. It's not communism. By the way, I'm not saying that I'm a communist. I am just exploring these ideas. And in the case of Russia and the Russian Empire, which became the Soviet Union, and don't forget the Soviet Union was not just Russia. Think of all those other satellite states and countries that were part of the Russian Empire. They became autonomous Soviet Socialist republics within the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. And when the Iron Curtain collapsed and the Soviet Union dissolved, they went their separate ways. They had independence, And if Russia was as land grabbing as people try and make out it is, don't you think they would have clung on to these vast swathes of land, of resource-rich land, the likes of Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan? But these countries went their own way, and now they are independent, autonomous countries in their own right. And Vladimir Putin, who is by no means a communist, I don't even know that you would call him a socialist, said, if you don't miss the Soviet Union, you have no heart. But if you want it back, you've got no brain. So he acknowledged that the Soviet Union did great things, but maybe it was for a time back then. Maybe things have changed. Maybe we can't have a society like that. Maybe that one didn't even work. Maybe it was the wrong time to experiment with communism. And Marx himself said, it was kind of like a prophecy. He wasn't telling people what to do. He wasn't giving people an ideology and saying, go out there and make it happen and become Marxists. He was just making predictions, quite prophetic, almost, although he called religion the opiate of the masses, almost like a prophet of biblical proportions. He said, this is what will happen. You will go from an agrarian, get it right, society, where people are peasants working the land, and that's when you had serfdom and the feudal system, the idea that people working on the land were essentially slaves to the owners of the land. You were a serf in those days. And he said you would go from that society to a capitalist society and on to a communist society. It was a foregone conclusion in his eyes. But we've got a caller. I wonder which professor this is. Hello, caller. You're welcome.
Hello?
Hi, welcome to Lessons for Life. Who's this?
Fuck around the pussy.
Okay. Superb. So you would go from a agrarian, feudal, rural society into a capitalist society, what with industrialization. He saw it happening in his own times, the industrial revolution, and he said it was inevitable that you would have to have that period of capitalism. He didn't specify how long it would be, and for that reason, good old Vladimir Ilyich, aka Lenin, who was not Russian, I think he was Georgian. Where was Lenin from? Was he Georgian? He implemented his new economic policy, which was deliberately a period of capitalism with a free market economy, but he was just kind of ticking a box in order to follow what Marx said needed to happen. Many people would say that Russia and the Russian Empire, as it was back then, was not ready for a communist revolution, and that is why it collapsed. Russia and the Russian economy, the population was still very rural. It was still peasant. It was still agrarian. So it was kind of like forcing a jigsaw piece into the wrong shape, trying to make it work when it wasn't ready. Maybe we'll never be ready. Maybe, as someone said in the chat, the only types of people that can live in something of a commune are the Amish, and they live like they lived hundreds of years ago. But of course there are other places where communism has worked on a small scale. It would seem when you get over a certain number of people, it just falls apart. Maybe that is why the lockdown is falling apart. Maybe that's why people are out sunbathing and mixing with their friends, because there's just too many of us, too many people, it's bound to go wrong. It's bound to fall apart. And maybe that is the reason why we need to think less in terms of individuals being the unit that makes up a country, a nation or a state. Maybe we need to think in terms of communities. Because of this lockdown, people have reached out to their neighbours in ways that they hadn't before. They've knocked on the door or made a phone call and said, do you need anything? Can I help you? We've gone into little pockets of people, and that's what may need to happen as the lockdown gets lifted. We may go into, do they say, is it groups of 10 people that you intermingle with? It's like we've gone from being 1 in a million, 1 in 60 million, or however many people there are in the UK, to being one member of our street or our family. Even when you step outside the door and everyone's clapping on a Thursday night, you have that sense of we're all in this together. And that seems to be a more localized phenomenon. There's Jamal Samiev in the chat saying, I never got good marks at school. There's a guy that knows how to make a word-related pun. Thank you for the t-shirt, Jamal. It still fits. I hope it wasn't mass-produced in a capitalist factory. But it is, I do like it when people hark back on the good old days of the Soviet Union. Was it that great? I don't know. I'm sure someone who was forced to work in a gulag could tell you how terrible it was. But then that's the Western capitalist propaganda that I've grown up with in one ear, and I always like to listen to the other ear and hear the other side of the argument. Was Russia really all that bad? And Russia, again, is being vilified, portrayed as evil, even though they've done away with the Soviet Union. They've done away with communism. So it's almost as if, well, they can't win, can they? They're going to be vilified no matter what they do. So maybe, just maybe, the people telling us to hate Russia are just telling us to hate Russia because Russia is a rival to their agenda and their plans for the world. And Triple T is saying, wartime neighbourhood watching going on nowadays. Yep, neighbourhood watch, spy on your neighbour, rat on them if they go out for more than 1 hour's exercise a day. Jamal in the chat saying, anyone who doesn't miss, yep, we've done that one. Jamal, you obviously didn't watch this stream from the beginning, but I did get that quote from Putin via yourself. And it's always good to have friends that speak other languages. They'll give you insight into the news that's going on in other countries, and Jamal is one of those people that is blessed to be bilingual. Well, he's trilingual, actually. He'll try anything lingual. Oh yes, very much. So the Soviet Union, they were the first country to put a man in space, Yuri Gagarin. That's when the Americans decided, no, the race was to the moon. They lost the space race, so they changed it and they wanted to go to the moon. And you had these two superpowers vying for who's going to come out on top. We've all seen Rocky IV when it got settled once and for all, and good old-fashioned hard work beat steroids. But I do think a bit of competition, ironically, communism and Karl Marx and Marxism, which is all about sharing everything equally and not competing with each other, not having an economy where you're trying to undercut your competitor and pay the least and charge the most and make the most profit. You're actually trying to say, let's pool everything, let's share all the wealth, and then we'll all be rich and then we'll all be happy. But of course, the dilemma there is, well, if everyone gets everything, who's going to do anything? If you don't have to get up in the morning to go and make the money, who's going to go and make the money? And another good quote that Jamal said to me was, if everyone had the same bicycle, no one would steal bikes. I'm not really sure where that fits in with what I'm talking about, but it came to me now. But the irony of the Soviet Union having this society that is not about competing, not about capitalism and trying to undercut each other, meanwhile competing with the great Satan himself, the good old US of A, when we had the Cold War, when the world was on the brink of war all the time. So although people at home as apparently weren't competing with each other in terms of wage, the country was competing with another country on the global stage in order to show who is best, which system works the best. And, well, who won? Who came out on top? I'm sorry to say, I guess, when the Iron Curtain collapsed, that kind of answered that question. But it was a great time for sport, and the Soviet countries, the Eastern Bloc countries, would pour a hell of a lot of money into sport, I think, to show the world how well they could do on that global stage. They pumped a lot of steroids into some of their athletes. You had Borisov, the great sprinter, what's he called? Borisov, the great Polish sprinter who was winning the 100 meters. It's been a long time since a Polish person has won any kind of 100-meter sprint. And you had then the was it 1980? When did the Soviet Union host the Olympic Games? I think it was 1980, which of course got boycotted, and loads of people won that wouldn't have expected to. And we've sadly had an Olympics cancelled this year. Is that the first time we've had Olympics ever cancelled? There will be an Olympics in 2021. It just doesn't sound right. I wonder, will that screw things up down the line? When will the next Olympics be? Will it be in 2025 or will it be in 2024? I wonder. We've got another caller anyway. Welcome, caller. Who's this?
Yeah, man, it's Animal Ross Show in the house.
Welcome back. We love to have you with us. And how did you celebrate Karl Marx's birthday?
You know what? I didn't really celebrate, to be honest.
Did you commiserate? Do you care about who Karl Marx was? Is he misguided?
I know about him, but I'm not into communism at all.
Why not?
Just because I don't want the state to dictate to me what I should have or I should not be able to have.
Okay, so you're one of these guys that wants to stand up for their freedom, all right?
Of course, I'm for freedom. Yeah, definitely.
What about the freedom to eat?
Sorry, say that.
What about the freedom to eat and have enough food on your plate?
Yes, I think everyone should have that right.
And some would say that the capitalist system is leading to people extorting other people. You saw what happened with people panic buying things and outlets jacking up their price and charging extortionate amounts of money for amenities that people need. Some would argue with capitalism that's happening anyway. With a demand for a certain item, the owner or the one who owns the means of production can charge as much as he wants, can exploit the people, can enslave the masses. Isn't that what communism was trying to resist against?
You know what you're saying is correct and exact. I'm totally against this capitalist system because it is a system of exploitation, and it's a system where it kind of has some people who have what they have, and then you have the others, half of the people have nothing. So I'm against that, but the problem we have is that we have really, the problem is the flesh, you know. what the problem is, the humans that are running these systems, whether it's capitalism or communism, it doesn't work because the people who are running it, they're corrupt.
Have you got a better system then? Let's. All right, capitalism's not working. Communism, they tried it and it failed. Have you, Hannibal Rastrill, got a third option for us that you can reveal tonight?
Yes, my option is it's a way where we can be human to each other and we can help each other. So I feel like three basic things should be met, for everyone on this planet, and that is everyone should be entitled to food, clothes, and shelter. So that's the three basic things we should all have on this planet.
Wow. And what if people don't comply?
With those three things, and everyone can have a chance of life, then we can progress much further and we can do a lot more after that.
But what would we, if that's all we need, and those basic things are all we need, what more would we do after that? And what wouldn't it turn into exploiting each other? In the chat, HK Stocks is coining a phrase, communalism, not communism, communalism. I'm not sure, maybe he could elaborate on that. Maybe this is the kind of communism that takes place on, as I said earlier, a smaller scale. But what more can we do once we've got our, as you say, nutrition and a place to live? What more should we be doing?
I think once we've got that, then it's gonna open up the doors because people are not gonna be struggling to live. From once you got a roof and you got somewhere to sleep, and you go to bed with your stomach full, then I feel like people can then start to think about other things, start to think about things that can make a better place for all of us, not just some of us, but all of us together.
Wow. And Rick Nahan is suggesting we read. Yeah, we could spend a lot more time reading. But I do think things get done when we have hard times, right? The leaps and bounds that technology let forward during the Cold War was because America and Russia were trying to outdo each other. They had that natural inclination to compete. Aren't we as creatures designed to compete with one another? In the wild, it's for survival. And if we lose that, I don't want to say killer instinct, but it is an instinct, we will just waste away, right?
Yeah, I don't agree with that because I feel like we are not animals, we are human beings. And once we're human beings, we have domain over this planet. So we should be able to get our resources together and we should be able to come together to make life better for everyone, not just a few, but for everyone. We don't need to compete against each other because if we all have access to the same things, then why should we have to compete?
Well, I just wonder if there's no competition at all, would we all get fat? I mean, would you go to the gym if it wasn't going to make a difference? Would you bother to brush your hair and dress up smart if women just dated any old loser?
I think competition should be done for competition for yourself, meaning compete to be a better person.
Well, this is a mentality. Not everyone has it. I sense you've got it, but not everyone has that inner drive to move forward and improve themselves.
True, but that's because everyone's just trying to survive on this system. There is hundreds of thousands of people that are dying every day because of hunger, because of disease and other things that could be really sorted out.
I hear what you're saying. Hannibal, I appreciate the call as ever, my friend. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much.
Well,
thank you for having me.
Thank you, welcome. Yeah, and it's always good to hear from Hannibal Rastrill with quite a spiritual take on things as ever. And I do sense that maybe his reluctance to, or his aversion to communism might be that it is completely void, pretty much of spirituality. But what is more spiritual than looking out for your fellow man? Was it Jesus who said, "You're not a true believer until you desire for your brother what you desire for yourself"? I wonder, was that Jesus? It might have been someone else. But it was certainly a spiritual quote. We've got another call on the line. Welcome. Who's this?
Hello there. How you doing?
I'm good. Who am I speaking with?
This is Nero, mate. How you doing?
Hello, Nero. I'm all right, mate. How are you?
Yeah. I'm all right. I've just literally been listening to it while I was out jogging, and I had my AirPods, and I was laughing. And do you know what?
Brilliant.
I was running, and I thought I forgot to come on the show because I think I came on the show the last time when that professor guy was on. Yeah.
Yeah. We had the professor tonight. Professor of something. I had to.
And do you know what? I was going to say this, Jules. Last time I think I came on the program, and I actually seen that Professor Hakim. I think it's the same guy, but
Have you really?
He does all these conventions and talks, and he has a mass following and what have you. But if it is the same guy, you know what? I think you should definitely bring him on and do some sort of like a general chit chat show with him.
Professor, if you're still watching, the door is open. There was a different guy. Well, a few years ago on a different radio station, I had a professor come on who was from America. He had a very sort of strange background story, and he said that he'd been touring the UK doing his book signing, and then he said he'd been to all these places, Bracknell, Farnborough, and he reeled off a load of really sort of local Hampshire and Berkshire locations, but he was sort of suggesting that he'd been doing a book signing across the whole country. So I don't know what it takes to become a professor these days. Hassan Radwan is in the chat. He is a professor of life itself. And is always welcome. You're not late to the party, Hassan. The party starts when you get here. We've been talking about Karl Marx, 202 years old. He would have been. Nero, I can never pin you down. I don't know whether you're on the left or the right. I think you're just a human being.
Yeah, well, to be honest with you, Julian, I'm very much right in the middle, in the centre. I have my own views that I've got some very left-wing, tendencies within me, and then I don't have much right-wing tendencies. But what I do have is that sense of proportion where I believe that there's a good. I mean, when it comes to politics, I tend to find that every party has something good within them, and so I'm often find myself right in the middle. So if you're talking about Marxism, if you're talking about communism, or if you're talking about the idea and belief that there should be an economy where everything's shared out amongst the people, I have to admit I am one of those.
Okay.
But equally, I also believe that people should work hard and.
But why would they? If everyone's getting everything equally, why would they work hard? Other than you should.
This is one of the things I've found about myself over the many years is that I seem to have these conflicting ideas and thoughts and things that go around in my head, because there's one side of me that's saying to me, "Gosh, look at all the amount of hours I put into my work. I deserve what I get out of it." On another level, I'm also saying, but equally, everybody, everything should be shared out and blah blah blah. So I don't know where I am in this, Judy.
Brilliant.
The question is a good topic tonight.
I
would say that I'm partially to the Marxism, and I'm partially towards capitalism. I'm partially towards Marxism. I don't really know where I fit.
Brilliant. Well, that's what makes me trust you. I never trust people that are 100% sure of anything, and we're living in times when people are, "Oh no, Marx was a terrible guy. No, he's absolutely awful," and other people say, "No, he was absolutely great." The truth will be somewhere in the middle. I like the quote that Jamal reminded me of, that Putin said, if you don't miss the Soviet Union, you've got no heart. If you want it back, you've got no brain. The truth is not usually black and white, is it? And nor are people.
Absolutely. And then when you talk about, what's his name? Corbyn, look, I was a big Corbyn fan, right? I was a big Corbyn fan, but then people don't understand when they hear me say that I'm a massive Andy Burnham fan. And and people don't understand when I say to them that I actually think this, what's his name, Boris Johnson, right? I actually think he's doing but equally, I was brought up and voting the Liberals. So
I think you want to see the good in people, and I get that.
And I'm very adaptable. Yes, I absolutely thought Corbyn was the man, and I loved his whole notion of bringing people together and that social kind of economy that he was thinking about. But equally, when I mentioned it the other day that I'm a big Andy Burnham fan, somebody was like, well, hold on a minute, how can you be an Andy Burnham fan and a Corbyn fan? And I said, well, I like Andy Burnham because I think he's a very sensible guy, and I think he talks a lot of sense. And he said, well, hold on a minute, he supported the war or whatever it was for Tony Blair. And I said, no, but you know what? Let bygones be bygones. I just want, there's certain things that I want, and I think that Corbyn had some of them. Burnham's got the others. But like I said to you, I was brought up on Liberals. I was a big Paddy Ashdown fan.
You were brought up as a Liberal, really?
Yeah,
okay.
Great.
Wow.
I just sometimes find that with people and politics, like you just mentioned a minute ago, I just can't, I don't think you can just say you're a Marxist or you're this or you're that. I think, ideally we should be a bit of everything. But I like you, I don't trust them. When people say to me they're 100% this, I'm like, really? Nah.
Exactly. I don't trust him. But I trust you, Nero. Thank you.
No worries, mate.
Good
night, mate.
Wonderful to hear from you. Thank you very much. Yeah, Nero makes a good point there. And it's interesting that he was brought up. I've never met anyone that was brought up as a Lib Dem. I thought they were just people that used to be Tory or used to be Labour that sort of fell out of love with that partisan side that they've been brought up with, and looked for a third option, a third way. We haven't had many coalitions in this country. We did have the Con Dem coalition a few years back. In the Republic of Ireland, there's very often a coalition. Fine Gael will very often be in coalition with the Labour Party because they rarely have enough to get over the line and have a full majority in the Dáil, as it's known over there. So they've had a lot more coalitions than we have had. In British politics, there is a new political party on the way. Keep an eye on George Galloway for his British Workers' Party. And George Galloway is a huge admirer of Karl Marx. I don't know if he says that he was perfect and is one of these people that would defend him no matter what, but he's certainly admirer of Karl Marx. And that term Marxist, it has become tainted over the years. We do live in times where people are very identitarian and they will just choose one identity and cling to it. I am a Marxist, first, second and last. Why not have many layers to your identity? You can be British and be a Muslim and be a Tottenham fan or whatever else there, and be a Scouser and be a Northerner and be Welsh. There are many layers to our identities, and as soon as we start saying no, I am this and nothing else, then I think we're on dangerous ground. That's when you get into fanaticism. And Triple T in the chat is asking what happened to the Respect Party. I don't know, Triple T. You'll have to ask George Galloway yourself. But it would seem to have faded away. Hassan Radwan's getting rather excited about Tottenham. Yes, of course he is. Side note, Hassan Radwan, what do you think will happen to the Premier League? Will Liverpool be allowed to be crowned champions? Will we conclude it behind closed doors? I'll be interested to find out about that one. And just to touch upon something we mentioned earlier on, or something we didn't mention yet somehow, but I do want to look at religion and bring religion into it, and this idea that Karl Marx said religion was the opiate of the masses. he had a very negative opinion of religion. And just to go into Marx's religious background himself, he was of Jewish heritage, would have regarded himself as Jewish. However, his father, not long after the Jews were emancipated in Germany, or Prussia, Bavaria, whatever. Germany was not even the modern state that we know it is now. Not long after the emancipation of Jewish people, but still at a time when anti-Semitism was rife. Some might say, when has anti-Semitism not been rife? Karl Marx's Jewish father chose to convert to Lutheranism, the Protestant sect of Christianity that was dominant in that part of the world at that time, so as to give his son and family a better chance in life to adopt this Christian identity. So Marx was certainly Jewish by background and ethnicity. He was brought up nominally as Christian, as a way to, as I say, give himself this better leg up, a better start in life. But he absolutely fell out of love with religion, and he called it the opiate of the masses. And some people might say, well, maybe he should have looked at other religions. I'm not sure if Karl Marx knew anything about Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, Zoroastrianism, or many of these other faiths that are out there. But he's very against religion. And his story actually mirrors our Prime Minister, Benjamin Disraeli, the first and only, that I know of, Prime Minister ostensibly of a Jewish background, although apparently our current Prime Minister does have some Jewish heritage and some Muslim heritage. He was quite proud of the fact, actually, that he has Jewish and Muslim roots. But Benjamin Disraeli was of full-on Sephardic Jewish background, but in his early years, his family baptized him into the Church of England. They didn't baptize his brother, just Benjamin, for whatever reason. And look how well he went on to do. Maybe being baptized into the Church of England, even if you're Jewish, gives you a good chance at becoming, or a better chance certainly, of becoming the Prime Minister. And to this day we have never had, and some say we may never have, a Catholic Prime Minister. Even good old Tony Blair waited until he had left office before he converted to Catholicism. So there is a link somehow to being ostensibly Christian and being the British Prime Minister. You've never had a President of the United States who is not portrayed as a Christian. I think Donald Trump is barely ticking that box, but he does try and kind of go to church and convince the Bible Belt lot that he is a Christian. And there was only one Roman Catholic President of the United States of America. I'll give you 3 guesses to who that was, and maybe you can tell me which year they killed him. So being of a certain religion does help you, and Karl Marx, it would seem, was against them all. And very unfortunately, some of Karl Marx's statements have been interpreted as anti-Semitic. I believe he was quoted at one point saying, "The religion of the Jew is money." Now, to hear this sounds very disturbing and anti-Semitic. Was this a person of a Jewish background holding up the mirror and criticizing his own community in the way that some African American pastors do when they're trying to drag up their community and tell them pull their socks up? Was this someone with internalized hatred for Jewish people, or was it someone who just wanted or was parroting the anti-Semitism of the time? I don't know. It's very uncomfortable. Someone in the chat saying you have to be religious to join the Freemasons. That's interesting, but you can't be a Catholic. Catholics are forbidden by their church to join the Freemasons. We can talk about that a lot at another time. But it is very unfortunate. And anti-Semitism, I said it was big back then. It's big now, and it crops up everywhere, and every side is guilty of it. I would suggest that the right wing, responsible for 6 million deaths during the Holocaust, are more responsible, more guilty of anti-Semitism than the left. But you've had this scenario recently where the left has become tainted with and synonymous with anti-Semitism, and it is unfortunate that you can point to quotes from Marx like that would read anti-Semitic, certainly back then and definitely all these years later. And traditionally, Jewish people from the time of Marx until now have been people of the left, have been, I mean, I'm generalizing, but I'm thinking of the great left-wing thinkers and even revolutionaries, and certainly in South Africa, the resistance to apartheid, the African National Congress had several, and we lost one only the other day. These Jewish individuals who were white-skinned but knew how it feels to be a minority. Dennis Goldberg, by the way, was who passed away the other day. He was part of the African National Congress and was in prison while Nelson Mandela was in prison, and due to the apartheid was in a different prison. These great Jewish Ruth First is another one. These great Jewish revolutionaries were resisting the racist apartheid state. And it's very sad now that right-wingers and the right wing, with all its heritage and history of Jew hatred and anti-Semitism and the horrors of the Holocaust, are now courting people of a Jewish identity and fear-mongering them into believing that somehow it's the left that is steeped in anti-Semitism. I find that quite disturbing and quite sad. HK Stocks is saying the Vatican banned Catholics from joining Freemasonry, but some join anyway. Well, I guess that's the thing about a secret society. No one knows, do they? But let's say good evening to a friend of the show, Hassan Radwan. Welcome. How you doing, Habibi?
I'm fine, thanks. Assalamu alaikum. How you doing?
Assalamu alaikum. Thanks for letting me catch my breath. Over to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment about the opium of the masses.
Yeah.
I mean, I totally understand that actually, well, it's a bit of a harsh remark, because I think actually religion fulfills a very great need of human beings.
I'd rather have that than opium, wouldn't you?
Well, I think human beings are faced with, obviously the mystery of existence, why they're here, and so on. We're faced with a lot of dangers, and religion provides a lot of comfort. It eases anxiety. It provides meaning. It provides purpose. It's allowed cooperation and cohesion amongst large groups. It's been an answer to a problem which man has faced since early times. The problem is you've got to believe it for it to work.
That's the thing about placebo.
And that's the problem, because I recognize that religion has done a lot of good. Unfortunately, it has some side effects as well, which can be quite bad. But at the end of the day, if the majority of people, get a lot of good out of religion, but unfortunately, a lot of the these religions were formed in ancient times, and they contain some things which nowadays are beginning to wear a bit thin amongst a lot of people. And I think we're going through a stage where a lot of people are moving away from religion, and but that anxiety and that sort of nihilism, feeling that we can't solve this mystery, is creating what's the alternative to religion? I don't know. I mean, yeah, it is an opium, but maybe it was a good opium. But what can replace it?
I think part of the problem is, Hassan, and I'm thinking out loud now, that we live in a time where people want the answer for everything. They want it to be literally true. They want to believe in God, not only believe in God, but understand what they're believing. And to put it this way, if I were to ask you, do you know what it is I like about jazz music?
No, I don't.
Good. That's what I like about it. The fact that I can't even explain what I like about it is part of what I like about it. And I think this is what people have lost in religion. Religion's meant to be a mystery. You're not meant to know what it means in the Bible or the Quran. You're meant to read it and ponder upon it and reflect and think, well, it could mean this, it could mean that. But you're not meant to start going out and saying, it means this, and if you don't believe my interpretation, I'll kill you.
Yeah. Well, that's a fair point. But, Julian, people are different.
Yeah, they're wrong.
People are quite happy living, and saying, I don't know, or there's this mystery. Other people, sort of want to know, and I mean, if they see things that don't make sense, and they say, well, why am I supposed? How can I actually believe that if it's not a real story? If it doesn't have any real truth to it, how can I gain that meaning and purpose from it, and that we are faced with our own mortality, and a religion provides this happy place that we can all go to. But if it's not actually true, if you can't actually believe that, then it's not satisfying for a lot of people.
No, yeah, I get that. I get that, and that must be a sad conclusion. I just think we're better.
It's a difficult place.
Yes,
it is.
It is.
A lot of people these days, who are obviously questioning the old religions, but there's nothing to replace it, because man is in this position and has been in this position ever since we jumped down from the trees.
That's true. But
thinking about our position,
Yeah, I'm coming more to the position that things can be true in more than one way. Like your approach is almost like some of the literalist religious people, but you've concluded the opposite, and that's fine. And that's fine. But you're still clearly a very spiritual guy who's searching for the truth somewhere. That shines through.
And I appreciate that there may be a sort of a more underlying meaning, but the problem is that there are a lot of people that do take it literally. I don't have any problem with people who don't take things literally. My main problem has always been with people who take things literally.
Yeah, no, I get that, and I just think we need to be able to respect differences of opinion, which obviously you can, and I don't know what we're going to do about the people that can't. They're just going to have to catch up eventually.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think we need to be more kind to each other.
Yeah, 100%. Hassan, thank you for being kind enough to call me. I appreciate it.
All right, Habibi, take care, yeah?
Good night. Sabah al-khair. Lovely to hear from you. Yeah, there goes Hassan Radwan. Absolutely lovely to hear from him, as always. And what can I say? It's been one hell of a birthday celebration. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you join me again in the chat. BA is saying the foundations of religion must be consistent. There can be differences in terms of the branches. That is due to time. Yeah. And he's also saying there is more mental oppression by non-religious people. Capitalism, for one. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. You can catch BA Fitness, that is, in our new series of videos where we chat to each other live on Instagram and then film it and put it up here. Dardasha is saying, if we're just kind to one another, that's enough. That is religion for her. Brilliant. Yeah, well, look, I'm not too fundamental about things, but I do hope you'll tune in again religiously every night from 10 p.m. or thereabouts on Lessons for Life. This has been Lessons for Life. It's been Karl Marx's birthday, 202. Happy birthday, Karl. We'll do it all again soon. We were here and we're gone. Latest.